What's up, y'all? It's Saturday. And on Saturdays, here on this Ravi and Co. YouTube channel, we've always streamed. So, just another one of those. I kid. I felt like walking y'all through this fantastic loop that I made a little while ago. It's one of my favorite ones that I've ever done for Borderline by Tame Impala. What is up, Amir? What's up, VSH? What's up, PJ? Ant? Good to see y'all. Essentially, I'm going to be going through the whole design process for this, as well as the animation process for how I built this whole thing. To get it kicked off, let's go ahead and just take a look at the video, shall we? This is what I will be breaking down for y'all today. And then it loops. I'm not going to play it too many times with audio, because otherwise the stream's going to get copyright stricken so fast. But anyway, let's head back over to Illustrator and start walking through this, shall we? What up, Ani? Good to see you again, man. I'm Seti, good to see you. Cooking Up Beats, how you doing? Anyway, so thought process-wise, what I do to create these loops now, whether it's just me or it's the team or whatever, is just listen to the song with my eyes closed a bunch of times over and over and over and over again. And I'm not thinking about animating at that point. I'm just writing down anything it makes me think of. So for example, with this one, I mean, you can see here, I have the order I eventually ended up going with, but I wrote down things like pyramids and palm trees. It felt like kind of tropical, but also in the desert, which was kind of interesting. Also thought about like chains and like glittery, shiny stuff. And so I just made sure to make a big list of all of those before I even edited the audio for the track. Then once I had a pretty long list, I think I had like 20 different ideas of things I could make scenes about. I then went and edited the audio down. I made it generally try to loop around like 10 seconds is how long I like to make these. In one loop, not much longer than that. Anyway, so then once I went and had the audio, I dropped it into After Effects first, actually, and just started putting down markers. You can see them at the top here. These are still the original markers I had. I'll put down markers for every single beat and then take ones out where I don't think there needs to be a scene transition. So anyway, you end up kind of like noting down like, all right, I can see a scene change here and a scene change here and a scene change here. And I try to generally keep it to like 11 or 12 scenes for a 10-second loop. With that in mind, I then had my little shopping list. I said, okay, I need to make 11 shots for this particular loop. So let's look at our big list of ideas and then let's refine them down into like some actual motion script ideas for each scene. So I did that. Excuse me. I'm not going to read through all these, but you can see them there. Anyway, the first shot, I saw these like sparkles, like really nice shines, and I knew that I would just like use pucker and bloat in After Effects. You can do it in Illustrator as well. Like for example, to make this shine shape that I wanted, I'd go to Effect, Distort and Transform, pucker and bloat, and then set it to negative 99%. And you get this nice little guy here, but if you use Overlord to push that to After Effects, it's just going to make it back into a circle because After Effects has its own pucker and bloat going on. But anyway, essentially because I knew I was going to do most of this in After Effects, my board for this was just a bunch of circles. Didn't need to be more complicated than that. This one, I've liked taking inspiration from the album covers of these tracks for ones that I've done solo. And so, you know, I took this album cover for the Slow Rush and ended up recreating it with like my own twist of what I wanted. So during my listening session, I had a pretty easy time seeing like a crown for some reason. I didn't know where to fit it, but I didn't want to make just like a pile of sand like is in here. So I decided maybe it'd be a cool thing to have like a crown on a pedestal. And you'll see There's a ton of just extra triangles off to the side of this for reasons we'll get into when we get into the animation, but effectively it lets me like slide them through a mat to make it look like the crown is rotating without me having to do any 3D. But anyway, this is all pretty simple stuff. This highlight here is just a triangle with a gradient in it. This little window is just like a rounded rectangle with a gradient in it. This thing over here is just a rectangle with a gradient in it. And then same with basically everything in here, some sort of shape with a gradient in it, and just like understanding, here's my color palette, base color palette. They're all colors from the album cover generally. And then understanding just how I'm going to use those. I try not to like start using white as my shadow color at any time. You know, I try and like understand what the rules of this world are going to be that I'm building, and then keep that lighting generally consistent. Anyway, what is up? When? Good to see ya. I'm your SSW stream. Want to see the thought process and illustration process? I got you. Ani says, do you get copyright strikes for doing these songs? On YouTube, I would if I did like a long form video using these tracks, but generally if you're making short form across Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, you can pretty much use any song you want. I also try and make sure that I edit the track in a way that's not actually how the song plays. Mostly just to make it so that it's easier to edit on my side to make the loop, but it also has the benefit of not just like taking the full song and putting it up on a post, and you know, but no problems for short form. Let's see. It says, did you track matte the triangles? Yes, in After Effects, that's exactly what will happen. So I ended up just like taking this shape, bringing it up, scaling it a little bit in After Effects, and then just like sliding all these guys through it. Another thing I try and do to be able to make these as fast as possible, I mean, this whole loop, I think boards and animation all combined took me like 5.5, 6 hours total in like one session. So in order to be able to do them that fast, I try and just like make a bunch of gradients and anything I think I could need before I even put down any shapes. I made the color palette before I did any of this other stuff, so that then that way it's easy for me to just be like, all right, here's the general composition of this, and then just start eyedropping gradients that I already made previously. Wen says, what is the name of the plugin to import Illustrator to After Effects? It's Overlord by Battleaxe. I wouldn't buy the first version, though, because they're about to come out with Overlord 2, which is going to fix a bunch of stuff. So be on the lookout for that. I think it's coming out in just a couple days. It might be out Monday, sometime next week. Don't know. But it should be good. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Just a bunch of shapes over there, no big deal. Now, I knew I had this shot in my head where I could see some like sand being like thrown in the air and it like glitters in the sun. But I wasn't about to go crazy designing all that in Illustrator, so I was like, okay, generally, here's some dots, that's fine. The background was just one of my gradients I'd already made before. And then I was like, I think the easiest way to do this is just going to be having a white square in After Effects and using CC ball action on it to scatter. And so for my board, I just put a white square down, and that was it. So some of these scenes like just don't look great as a board, but it's because I just already knew what I was going to do with it anyway. Now this one was a little bit more confusing. I had this idea of like a bunch of lines in this J shape that the camera sort of follows and goes up to then like follow back down. So I kind of just had to trust the process on this one. I wasn't really sure how I was going to animate this until I got into After Effects, but generally I said I'll probably need a bunch of lines, and then I'll need like one main line for the camera to follow. So that's what I did. There you go. Cascading lines. Easy peasy. And it says coloring is my absolute weakness. Oh yeah, I was really, really bad at it for a hot minute, but it's just, I mean, I've probably made close to like 65 of these loops in the past couple years now, so it's just over time it got a little bit easier. Coconut Beat says, sorry if my English is bad as it's not my main language. No worries, dude. I think your English has been just fine. Wen says, thank you. My workflow is designing in XD, but I want to switch to Illustrator. That's crazy. I didn't even know that XD was still around, though I guess with them not ending up being able to acquire Figma, it makes sense. That's wild. Yeah, use Illustrator. It's great. It's awesome. I had this other shot idea after that where there were going to be like pyramids kind of like building up and rotating over this planet surface thing. That's not what actually ended up happening. I got into After Effects and was like, this is not something that's going to be as easy as I thought it was. So on the fly, I adapted. I ended up doing this cool, like, sacred geometry thing, I think. Actually, no, I did that over here. What did I do for this one? I just made, like, duplicates behind it, essentially, that did some, like, faux 3D rotation. It's really easy to make these, like, fake 3D pyramids. You just have a triangle at first. You duplicate it, and then you just move this, like, front anchor point. And, I mean, you can already see that looks like it's rotating, you know? So you just do a little bit of path animation, and it's such an easy, simple little trick. But anyway, there's that one. I couldn't get enough of lines, apparently, so I had this idea where there was going to be this, like, colorful tunnel that, like, pulses out, so I just made a bunch of different sized rectangles, and then some of them I put gradients on, and some of them I put flat colors to kind of, like, simulate light coming from the middle, even though there's not actually light in there, it's just colors. Let's see, is there any alternative to Overlord? Not that I know of, unless you want to just be dragging Illustrator files in. But to get gradients from Illustrator to After Effects, Overlord's like the only way, I think. Anyway, this, I think, ended up being my favorite shot out of the whole thing. It wasn't during the design process, but essentially I wanted this, like, sacred geometry, just a bunch of, like, cool grid lines and circles and things, making this cool, like, pretty intricate design on top of this pyramid, as if it's, like, emitting it. Some sort of, like, sign from a civilization or something. I have no idea, but I could see it in my head, so that's what I made. I wasn't, like, super stoked about it in the design process. I thought it was gonna be fine, but I really ended up having some cool, like, glow techniques and stuff in After Effects that made it one of my favorite ones, if not my favorite of the whole thing, I think. But this is just, I just copied the same scene over here, essentially, and then just added a bunch of circles. It really wasn't anything too crazy. I had this thing for palm trees, but I didn't want to deal with actually having to create, like, a bunch of trees that really looked like trees, because I like just living in my simple shapes. So I just implied a palm tree by essentially making all the palm fronds out of just, like, ellipses that I could make, like, wave around in After Effects. So that's that. I just made one of these, and then I made sure that the gradient was always pointing to the sunlight that I put in there, I guess. Anyway, we're almost to the end of the design process here. I'm gonna move this. This one I had this idea of, like, blocks building up on a pedestal. I like the design frame a lot more than I liked the animation. Some of these, you really never know which way it's gonna go. Some of these I liked a lot more in design, some I liked a lot more in animation, but this almost looks kind of like some digital key or something. I don't know, but I really loved the lighting on this. It just feels very dramatic. The contrast just made the blue really pop. I don't know. But the idea being you'd have one cube pop up and do a faux 3D rotation, another one pop up above that, and another one pop up above that. So you just have this stack of, like, rotating cubes. And it's super easy to do fake 3D rotation on this as well. You literally just change the size of this front square on each one, and it makes it look like it's rotating. So as easy as I can make the process, I will do it. Even if, like, to some people, it might look a little lazy almost, because I'm not really having to try and do this crazy technique every time. I will, if it's going to work for me to just, like, change the size of a square to do some 3D, I'm going to do that. If that's the easiest way. After making such an easy scene, though, I decided to really make it difficult on myself and wanted to make a chain for some reason. I don't know. Shiny chain in the sky. So I had to do a bunch of physics and other stuff with this that you'll see. But the hardest part for designing this one, I had to create a couple new gradients to be able to make the chains work. None of these ones up here looked good for metal. So I made, like, a light mode version and a dark mode version. And then by far the hardest part was just having to make the chain link itself. Like, you don't realize how complicated shapes are in something like this until you have to try and recreate it with just simple shapes and stuff. But anyway, essentially what I had to do was create two variations of this shape here, and then sort of like overlap them. So you've got like 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes to make each of these links, and then you can just like copy those and nudge them up against each other. I tried also doing red chains, but I didn't like how they looked with the background. They looked like too dark for what I wanted. But anyway, animation on this one was a little annoying to set up, but not too bad. Anyway, then I had this one where I wanted to have this like top-down view of an oasis in the desert. So I had like top-down views of like our trees that we had earlier by just making some simple circles. I joined two together here. And then this being like a stream instead of the sky, with our crown on the pedestal being represented just by like a circle here from a top-down view. I love anything that has like super high contrast. So having the light source looking like it's coming from up here, because that's where all the highlights are on these gradients. Having like all this detailed lighting and then just being like, nah, my shadow is just going to be really sharp. And it's just a rectangle behind this thing. Feels really, really good to me. But anyway, those are all the frames. Essentially, the process for all of these is relatively similar design-wise. I come up with a bunch of different ideas I could have for scenes. I pick which ones make sense for the number of scenes I end up having in the audio. I create my color palette with as many gradients and colors as I can think I will need, and then I just like stick to that color palette as much as possible the whole time as I'm making all of these different things. So that way the lighting is consistent, the shape language is consistent. Good time. I think all in all, it took like an hour and a half to design all of these-ish. Let me catch up with chat real quick. Hold on. Let's see. Ani says, best animation Oscar goes to Ravi when? I mean, hey, man. Let the committee know. You know what I'm saying? Ant says, that's so smart with the path animation. I thought you guys full on made 3D shapes and rotated and such. Some people on the team can. Like, Will... amazing at 3D and After Effects. So is Sam. I cannot do it very well. I have done faux 3D for so long that I live in the trickery and I'm here for it. Sam says he's streaming again. Yeah, bro. I'm hanging. It's a good time. I was ultimately very bored today and there's not enough stuff for me to do on you know what, the thing that we're making. So I just decided I'd stream instead. Ravi Rave when? Hey, if we ever have a conference, you better believe there's gonna be a Ravi Rave going on. Let's see. Smoothini's has been wanting this kind of tutorial. Thanks. Of course. If you have any questions throughout, you just let me know. Ant says the chain part is crazy. Thank you. Amir says your stream's making me want to make a loop. Do it, man. It doesn't have to take a crazy amount of time. I mean, I say that having done a ton of these, but I mean, still like the first one I made of these was really short. It was probably like 5 seconds or something and pretty uncomplicated. It was like one scene. You can start it however you want, but I say go for it. You breaking down what the animation is helps me appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. I hope that y'all are able to learn something from it. I don't know. I often find that I do things in a way where people are like, really? You only had to do like those 2 steps? But that's how I like to do it. Alive does stuff. Says yo just got in, wasn't expecting a stream at this time. Me either, man, but we're here. Ignacio says, do you think it is necessary to know how to draw to make motion graphics? Absolutely not. I can't draw at all. My handwriting, horrible. Ask me to make anything like sketching a person, anything like that, I can't do it. I'm terrible with like physical mediums, pen and paper, pencil paper, whatever. Sculpting, forget it. You know, I'm just not great at that sort of stuff. But I do really like my simple shapes, and I've learned how to be able to like look at, if you look at the stream from 2 days ago, I had to make this like electrical plug. And just having the skill set now to be able to look at anything and just break it down into simple shapes has made it a lot easier. But still, you asked me to do it with pen and paper, it doesn't go very well. So I would say no, you do not have to know how to draw at all. In fact, I would say most of the people on the Ravi team don't know how to draw or can't draw very well. There are a few that can, but I think the majority of us just can't do it. Leonard says, and this is all going to be one video? Yeah, man, it's only been, actually, I don't Has it been like 20 minutes-ish to get through the Illustrator stuff? Probably another 20, 30 minutes to get through the After Effects stuff. I'm gonna keep it all in one thing, don't worry. There's kind of no part 2 necessary on this. Instead, he says, Austin, you got the sleeper 3D Blender chops, don't forget. I mean, that's true. That's true. I have made an entire client project in Blender before, and it didn't turn out too bad, actually. I just don't have a whole lot of patience for the modeling portion, to be honest, and the shader creation and texturing. I haven't enjoyed very much. Maybe I would now, but in the past I haven't a whole lot. That all being said, let's get into some animation, shall we? I think I finally caught up with everything. All right, let's go scene by scene here. So you'll see when it's just me designing these, I am still insane and put everything in one comp, unless there's something really complicated. So let's do this thing, shall we? Now you'll recall I said I was going to make those pucker and bloated shapes at the beginning, and that's exactly what happened here. These are just circles with, under contents here, you can see I went to add, and then I know you can't see this, but there's a thing here that says pucker and bloat. You hit that, it adds it here. Works the same as it does in Illustrator. I set it to -99. If you go over that, it starts to like bend in on itself and not look as nice, but I like the like really sharp pointy edges. So -99 keeps it that nice shape without going over. Feels good. Essentially, I animated this once. It does like this color change as well as like scaling up and then back down really fast to start. The opacity flickers, so it feels like on hold keyframes, it kind of feels like a light reacting in a more organic way, which is nice. There's a little deep glow on it. You can see that here. It does a little exposure flash, so the glow increases on the second frame and then goes back down to normal. And then essentially, I just duplicated that multiple times. I think there's 4 of these total in here. Actually 5, I think. Offset the start of them so you'd see like one appear, and then 2 frames later another one would appear next to it, and so on and so on. And they're all actually attached to a null that position drags them off to the side. And that's it. It's just 5 shapes. I only animated one of them, moved them over, and then added a null. Bang, bang, bang. Easy peasy. So that was the first shot. Nothing too crazy there. Then we've got our crown. So I will say at first, this one, where is it? Okay, so originally the scale was just this. It was going to be zoomed out this whole time. But I felt like there wasn't enough happening in the scene to make it very interesting. So what I ended up doing was adding a null over top of the entire scene and then scaling the scene back down, as well as doing some like position tracking with another null to keep the crown in view. But that way it feels like there's another action happening once you zoom out and you reveal the whole shot with like the rest of this wall and all that stuff. But anyway, the part I'm sure people are interested most here is this crown. So like I said, we had a bunch of extra rectangles in Illustrator, right? And it was for this reason. So I have this little top section, or this mat, and effectively what that does is just say, hey, put those triangles here and only show them inside this box. And then the triangles themselves move with position through through that mat. So that it looks like the crown is rotating, but it's quite literally just triangles sliding to the left. So that's all that happens there. The other thing that makes it feel like metal and like it's shiny is like, yes, there's a gradient that already looks like that, but I added Colorama. So I replaced the gradient that I drew in Illustrator, made it black and white, and then Colorama will map whatever colors you put in Colorama to the black and white, and then let you do this cool thing with the input phase where you can like shift the gradient around. So I have it doing that throughout the whole scene. So you'll see that like that gradient is moving through the crown Just makes it feel like it's reacting to some sort of like HDR or lighting or something like that. And then I did the same thing with the triangles up here. I actually made another rectangle that has that same colorama going through it, and then put that through the triangles as a mat. So we're like 2 mats deep here. But that was pretty much it. Otherwise, the crown is attached to this pillar via parenting, and then the pillar slides down for anticipation and then shoots up into the air. I did also add a little bit of color overlay over top of the crown to match the background color a little bit, so that like it seems like it's getting darker as it goes out of our little thing of light here. Just a little extra touch. I don't even think it's really that noticeable when you watch it, but it was a good time. Anyway, shall we move on to the ultimate glitter experience here? I told y'all I knew I was just going to use some particles here, so that's exactly what I did. I said I have a square. It's a square, it's white. I added CC ball action with scatter, and then essentially that, you know, makes it all into little tiny balls that scatter. So that's exactly what happened. I made a couple different duplicates of that, essentially, so that you could get like some that are really small in the back here, some that are medium size, and then I brought in some of those same shines that I made at the very beginning, copied them over here to like specifically glint off of just a couple of these particles in a nice way. But that wasn't too bad. Another thing that was fun to make them really feel like, you know, if you see glitter up in the air or something, it kind of like blinks in and out a little bit. So I did a similar colorama thing on this. I had the white of the color palette and then the blue of the background. And I think I set it to screen or something. So that I could like move white and blue through the particles, so that sometimes you'd see some of them look like they're disappearing or something, so that it would feel more organically like they're blinking in and out like real glitter would. But it's really just changing it between white and blue. And again, most of this is all on nulls. It's just all attached to one null that drags everything off to the right to then set up the momentum for our next thing. But I will catch up with chat first before we go into that. Ant says, this company I want to work for, Digital Brew, the founder CEO said he prefers that people leave everything in one pre-comp rather than saving a ton of pre-comp, saves render time and less clicks. I mean, for us, well, for me, I feel that way whenever I'm just the only person making something, unless I have something complicated that I need to set up in like time remap or whatever. Or if I need to like reuse one thing over and over again, I might pre-comp it if there's multiple layers. But as a team, usually like I only have to work on 1 or 2 scenes every project, same with everybody. So we keep most everything in one pre-comp for each other. So like if I have scenes 1 and 2, I'm gonna make that all in one pre-comp and then export that as a QuickTime file to put in our master file. And then like if Sam has scenes 3 and 4, he'll make scenes 3 and 4 in one pre-comp, export that as a QuickTime file, drop the QuickTime file into our separate master file as well. So essentially like a final Revi export, if the whole team is working on it, is just a bunch of high quality QuickTime exports. So that way like the final render is like that because it's already all been pre-rendered and baked in. But if it's just me, I'm also just doing everything all in one pre-comp. It just makes everything less complicated. Let's see. Mseti says, put all the stuff in the same comp, call it mono comp. You can trademark that. That sounds good. Ant says, did you duplicate the triangles and flipped one and made them come in from opposite directions? No, it's all just one row of triangles that just slide, and that's it. Ignacio says, how do I become a pro like you at motion design? I still got plenty that I can learn. That's for sure. But I guess the easiest way to get comfortable with motion design is just practicing consistently, even if it's small stuff. Ant says, Colorama, taking notes. It's perfect. I used to animate all my gradients just using the start and end points, and you just can't really do a whole lot with that after a certain point, you know? So to be able to like consistently cycle the gradient through feels really interesting. The Hubert says, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen there's no camera layers in that, so are you just making shapes overscaled to make some fake perspective effect? No, I just use nulls as my cameras. I don't like thinking of animating through the lens of a camera. I like thinking of the camera being fixed in place and me moving things around in front of the camera. So like if I wanted to animate a ball, I'm just gonna like move that ball up and down. Well, that makes sense. If I have like a big landscape, I would rather move the landscape rather than moving the camera to look around the landscape, if that makes sense. I don't know why I find that to be easier. Maybe it's just one less variable to have to think about, to not have to deal with a camera. But that's how I started in motion design, and I guess that's just what I've stuck to today. There's a couple people on the team that use cameras, but I think most people have done it how I've done it. At Ruby anyway. Linear says, are you gonna show your render settings? Would love to see them. I'm gonna make, I'll show you, but it's really simple. I promise it's not as exciting as you think. I just file, render queue, high quality, preset. That's it. And just output it as a QuickTime file. If I'm gonna then put it into another master file for a final export. Final exports, if a client asks for a QuickTime file, we'll give it to them. But if we're putting it up on social, it's always just file, render queue, H.264. Like that's it. We don't have any like special settings or anything. I think I have my After Effects is set to 16-bit color depth. That might be something. It might be set to 8-bit by default. And so that maybe helps the glows look a little bit better, but that's it. I don't know. There's no like secrets or anything there really. Anyway, let's get through a couple other scenes here, and then I can go through some more questions. Okay. So remember this shot, I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. But we got there, I think. So effectively, think back to the first shot where I knew I was going to need a bunch of different sparkles, so I animated one sparkle and then duplicated a bunch of times. Same thing happened here. I animated one line doing something, so like here, if we look at this, shoot, I'd have to like unparent all my stuff. Essentially, this line changes a bunch of colors on hold keyframes here, and then the stroke width goes like, or just kind of like gets big for a second and then slowly gets back to normal, to have a little like pulse to have it show on the screen nicely. Anyway, so I did that, duplicated that across this line, which I'm realizing now was like the track I wanted the lines to follow. Essentially, I was giving myself like a little reference for like how to angle the lines. And then you can see all I had to do is place them along the lines. I then moved everything on a null, and we followed the lines up, and then I had them start going back down to or like have them appear going down off the screen to set up the momentum for this. That was it. I animated one line, duplicated a bunch of times, rotated it as I needed to, and then sent everything back down. And that was pretty much it for that one. Here's our little pyramid guy. It's exactly like I told you. Like if this pyramid is it's just path animation doing this whole thing. So here is our front shape. You can see that over time, I just have that bottom corner, the bottom right corner, just like slowly move across. And that makes it look like the whole thing is a 3D shape that's rotating. I animated that one pyramid, and then I duplicated it in front, and then duplicated in front again, duplicated in front, and then I sent them off in different directions. And then did some like progressive blurring on each one using Fastbox Blur. And then I had Colorama going through this bottom circle here, or the ground plane, I guess. Ah, crap. So sorry, everyone. So sorry. Okay. It's so easy to forget that. Okay. So let me go back through that. This pyramid, like I said, the front plane here, if you look at the, where is it? If you look at this bottom point here, I just have it like slowly move to the right the whole time. And what that does is then make it look like the whole thing is 3D. After that, I just duplicated it a couple times. And it was like the same animation was baked into that pyramid. I duplicated it in front, scaled it down, and just flipped it so it would be in the opposite direction. Then at the end of that shot, I just slide them all off screen, and I use fastbox blur to like give some depth there. Let's see. And then this ground plane here has some colorama on it. As you can see, this like black to red to dark red just continually goes through so that you've got this kind of like interesting perspective. And you can see our sparkles have consistently shown up throughout the entire video in like most of the shots. I just take that layer, copy paste it, and just parent it to the top of those pyramids just to like give a little bit of extra emphasis on each one. But pretty easy scene overall on that. And the lines, same deal. I don't know if I was screen sharing that part or not, but essentially they move off to the right and then slide back down. Easy peasy. And I just animated one of those lines at a time. Here we go. Let's go on to the next one. If I wasn't screen sharing part of that you want to know about, you let me know. That's my bad. It's so hard to forget to hit the little button on my stream deck. All right. Now we are on to our little color tunnel here, and then I'll go through some of the questions in the chat. So effectively, did I make each of these into, no. Okay. So rather than making 2 rectangles on either side and having to worry about making them the same sizes, what I did here was just have a bunch of a rectangle in the middle, and then I would scale it up a little bit widthwise, bring it to the back, and do that over and over and over again. But every other one was the background color, so that you would get like a colored rectangle, and then behind that background one that's a little bit wider, then another colored one. And so it makes it look like it's got these stripes in it, but it's really just a bunch of rectangles over top of each other. So anyway, with that in mind, pretty similar thing to what I did with the lines in 2 shots ago. You just have some hold keyframe color changes / gradient changes. I think actually, so I didn't have to do color keyframes and gradient keyframes. I just like each of these flat colors is actually a gradient of just the same color to the same color. So that's that. And then they just like come in at one size, scale a little bit after 2 keyframes, and then scale back down to their original size. And you can see that here. So if I go to this guy, you can see those colors changing on hold keyframes, and then you've got scale keyframes that are both set to exponential decays to have it go from 100% to 200%, and then 10 frames later back down to 100%. So they do this cool like flex thing, and then all of these come in like 1 frame after the other. So you've got this nice like cascading going on. And I didn't use any plugins or anything to set that up. I just am insane and will sit there and move all the shapes layer by layer. But it makes it like that. It's a nice cool little effect there. And then I added extra rectangles off to the side that weren't doing any of that so that I could slide it off to the left to set up the next shot, which I think is my favorite one out of the whole thing. It's really pretty. It's just the way those circles and lines flash and glow just feels really like it's like just a good texture. I don't know. And the color changing of the glows, like that teal that's in there as well, just makes it feel so visceral when it comes in there. I don't know. I really, really like that one. One thing I added to the pyramid this time was a shape in front, which effectively I'm using to act as like, if light is hitting the pyramid here, that way it's like reflecting on the ground. So you'll see that that shape on the ground actually expands at the same time that that first shape does, so that it's like reacting to the faux 3D there. But the thing I'm sure people are really wondering about here are these rings. So they all have the same effects stack on them. They just happen at different times, essentially. So it's a pretty, you'll see it's a pretty similar thing to some of these other ones. You've got colors changing on hold keyframe. So it starts white, goes to teal 2 frames later, then 2 frames after that goes to an orange, and then back to the white. While that's happening, the stroke width starts at 2, then goes to 40, and then slowly gets back down to 2 again. So you get this nice like whoosh, big like ripple. I also have on the circles a little bit of scale from the point at the top of the pyramid. So it goes kind of like up into the air. Wanted to make it all feel like that energy is coming from the pyramid up into the air. And then we've also got deep glow on this guy. That goes from 1 exposure to, wait. Oh, sorry, this one's on hold keyframes. 1 to 0.2 to 1.49. Like it just swaps out every once in a while so that you can see this like kind of like glistening changing exposure value on each one, which makes them look like they're twinkling in a nice way. And then I brought in little shines again, which are the same ones that I had animated at the very beginning that I am just copy pasting at this point across there. But that's all on those. I just, every time the scene shows up, it just feels like whoosh, like, oh, okay. That's just a cool thing to look at. So shiny. I'm here for it. Let's see. Next, we have our palm fronds. Like I said, these are all just a bunch of ellipses with different like directions of the gradient on them. I didn't do any colorama or anything on these. I just have the anchor points at the ends of all of them and their offset. So I essentially said for each of them, the rotation starts at -14 and ends at +28. So it just like gets them to where their position was, or the position I wanted them to be in. So they can like fly down for anticipation, and then I have everything rotate back up at the end there. But the way it looks like it's waving is just because I have them come in one at a time. So this one starts its rotation a frame before this one starts its rotation, a frame before that one starts its rotation, and that one, and that one, and that one, and so on. And then you've got some rotation bringing it down into the frame, and then you've got other rotation taking it back up and off the screen. But let's catch up with chat. We've only got like 3 more scenes to go through. Let's see. Talha says how to come up with new motion ideas. Couple things. So essentially to build up your library of ideas, just watch as much motion work as you can. You'll start to sort of see like the same kind of scenes that you can put in different categories in your head. Always good to just have a bunch of references that way that you don't necessarily have to go look for because you've just already watched a bunch of videos. That's helpful. Not worrying about like your ability to create something is incredibly important as well. I make a point in this particular process when I am listening to the song over and over again to come up with ideas. I'm consistently telling myself to not listen to the part of my brain that's like, oh, but you don't know how to do that. Why would you write that idea down? You don't know how to do that. That's going to be difficult. You have to like kind of suppress that instinct to avoid the thing you have no idea how to accomplish. For me, that would be something like characters or anything to do with like real world stuff like plants or people or any of that sort of stuff terrifies me. But I'll still write down some of those ideas because they might help inspire other thoughts and adjacent things and whatever. So watch a bunch of stuff. Don't let yourself stop the ideas that you have just because you think they're going to be too difficult. And then practice as much as you can, because like for me now, I don't really have to look at any references or anything because like I've made so many videos that it's easy for me to mishmash like different scenes from stuff I've already made and come up with new stuff, you know? So just keep practicing. Don't let yourself beat yourself down and watch as much stuff as you can to build up that mental library, I would say. My 3-step plan for ultimate motion design success. Endorsed by all motion designers everywhere. She says, oh my god, my favorite creator is live. Good to see you, man. Denzel says, how do you animate your gradients in After Effects like the gradients made in Illustrator? So, real quick process on that. I use Overlord to send gradients from Illustrator to After Effects. As far as I know, that's the only way to do that. And it's definitely the easiest way, if not the only one. Send them that way. And then if I want to animate like a gradient cycling through something, I will use the gradient I had in Illustrator as a reference, like on my separate screen, and use Colorama to map a white to black gradient on a shape to the colors that I want. And then you can like have them rotate through the shape using something called input phase. But the Colorama effect is essentially how I do all of that at this point. And it says random, but PC specs. I currently have a Ryzen 9 5900X, 64 gigs of RAM, and a 3070 Ti, I think. But I've been making stuff like this back when I had like 12 gigs of RAM and like a 1050 Ti, and I don't even know what CPU I would have had at the time. But that's what I currently have. Amir says, have you heard of After Codecs? It lets you export MP4 in QuickTime directly from After Effects. A lot of cool settings. Can't... Oh, I already can export MP4 and MOV from After Effects, I think. Does it let you do something else? I feel like the render queue's recently gotten really, really good. Like you're able to do a whole lot more than you were before. Then everybody was in Illustrator. Yes, yes, yes. That's my bad. Just Sam says, how can learn? I'm not telling you. Hassan says shot deck or eye candy for motion design. What are those? I haven't heard of that. Ant says, was there any motion graphics that came to mind or referenced as you made this? Nope. I was just sitting in my head. The only reference point I had was the album cover, essentially. Noah says, poopies, Minecraft keyboard. Sam says, Noah, no. Noah says, hee hee, hey gamers. Omar says, thank you, bro. Bro's literally just Coloramas, what do you mean? Overlord 2 is coming out in a bit. That is true. And now the people are going crazy. Noah went on both accounts. That's nuts. Crazy, bro. Anyway, Alive does stuff, says RenderQ better than Adobe Media Encoder. For a while, it was the opposite. You couldn't do a whole lot out of RenderQ. But Media Encoder was awesome for a sec. And now I would never go back to Media Encoder because it is so slow by comparison. Anyway, we've got 3 more scenes to get through, shall we? Here we go. Here's the thing that looked like more of a digital key in Illustrator, which I'm not going to go back to so that I don't actually say on Illustrator. But effectively, pretty similar concept that you saw with the pyramids. I took one square, duplicated another square in front of it, and then made this white square get skinnier and wider in order to make this look like it was rotating around. Once I did that, duplicated it a couple times, bang, bang, bang. Now you've got a stack of 3. And I took the same pillar that I used in as the pedestal for the crown and put it in here. It was pretty easy. Essentially just had it, there's like some animation inside that shape layer to do the faux 3D of the rotation. And then I had position up and position back down. Easy peasy. The pickup line. What pickup line? Hey girl, are you Colorama? Because I want to animate your input phase endlessly. Slay. That made my phone go off. I didn't see you put one there, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can handle it. It's all good. Anyway, there you go. 3 cubes up and down, no problem, no big thing. I didn't even animate the gradients on those either. I was feeling crazy. Okay, now for the big one. Now the big one. Some chains. You may see this is the only spot we've gone to so far where I have pre-comps. That only happens when little Austin gets scared and is like, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So let's walk through it. Effectively, why I had to make the pre-comp was because I needed to colorama through the chain pieces to make it look like metal and like it was reacting to the light as it moved. The problem is these are all 4 different shapes with 4 completely different gradients. So I had to have all of them in here as black and white gradients. You can actually see that if I turn all these off. Hold on. Had to have all of these as different black and white gradients that then when I add the colorama on top, it maps the proper gradient to each one and slides through the shape. And I didn't want to deal with having to copy and paste like 4 layers over and over and over again. I just knew that would end up messing me up. So I pre-comped them, which wasn't too bad. And then to get the actual chain movement, essentially I would put one down, then I would put the anchor point at the edge, attach another one to that edge, and then another one to that same edge, and another one to that same edge, so that when I rotated the first one, it would rotate all the ones underneath, and so on and so on and so on. So you get this nice organic bend through here. It would appear that I didn't attach something here or accidentally just mess something up because that one no longer rotates for some reason. But I don't think it was like that in the actual video, so don't know. But anyway, that's effectively what ended up happening there. The other thing I had to do is add a bunch of these little sparkles and stuff, and I just did that by like dragging it onto the canvas from one of the other scenes, and then parenting it to one of those pre-comps of the chain. When I had the first one, this first chain in the front, kept it unblurred, duplicated all of them, scaled them down a little bit, put it up top and lower in the layer stack, added fastbox blur. Now you've got some perspective, etc., etc. Easy peasy. So all in all, wasn't crazy, but really was like a lot to have to think through at the time in order to make sure that the rig was set up properly. But it was fun. It's a pretty scene. Had a good time with it. So good, in fact, it made me have to sneeze. I'm just allergic to really good motion. But anyway, on to our final scene. I don't even... How long is this taking? We're like right in an hour. This ain't even that bad. We went through design and animation, like no problem. This one, very simple. I didn't even do any colorama except for on the river. And at this point, we know it's a white to black gradient underneath. Colorama has these 2 colors in it. It's got the blue and the white, and then I just have it cycle through there. Did I add colorama onto the crown? No, I did not. That just sits there. Doesn't animate or do anything. Does it have a little scale thing? Oh, yes. Okay. I wanted the perspective as it gets, like... I wanted essentially the camera to, like, get closer to the objects at the end, so they'd get larger on the screen and then would match the, like, bam of the sparkle at the beginning. So I have the ring of the crown get bigger to match, like, the size of the pedestal it's on as we get closer to it. So you get this, like, perfect circle at the end, which I thought was just kind of satisfying. And then other than that, it was really just, like, a little bit of parallax, like, moving these shapes on the side a little bit less since they're so big compared to this object here. And that was it. There really isn't anything else there. And then, I mean, you go back to the beginning, and there it all is. From there, essentially, it's just treatment stuff. I have my normal, like, Deep Glow stack, which will be different since Deep Glow 2 is coming, and I now have that. But for the time being, anyway, it's just, like, a subtle base level glow, some curves to bring the colors back down to what they were, get the saturation in order, because Deep Glow has a tendency to, like, desaturate stuff a little bit more than I want. Added some grain, no big deal. I have the grain, like, change on hold keyframes so that it feels kind of like it's at a lower FPS. Let's see, what else? Oh, and then compound blur is pretty awesome. Let me find one where it's really visible. So compound blur is amazing. I love using fastbox blur, but compound blur lets you selectively put blur on different parts of the scene. So, for example, if I wanted to make it look like there's some extra depth in the shot, I can add a blur here to sort of like just slightly mask this edge. Same with up here, etc., etc. Thank you, Noah, for the $5 donation back to our own studio. Your support for the Ravi cause is not unnoticed, sir. Anyway, and so for each scene, I have a different map of shapes with some fastbox blur on it, and then I can have my compound blur layer say blur according to that shape layer, take its effects and masks also so that it sees the blurring of the edges, and then you get this nice selective blur across each scene here. So there you go. that's pretty much it. I just change where the shapes are for each shot, depending on like where the action is happening most, and all that jazz across the whole thing. And that's it. Easy peasy. Whole loop. There's everything you need to know, unless there's specific questions otherwise, but that's everything I thought through while creating it. And now I will look through some of chat. Ant is a sleepy little guy, so I hear. Noah's trying to boost Austin's views. he's trying to boost our views, bro. I'm just the review rep right now that's online, you know? Let's see. Sonny says, glad to be here. Stoked to see how you achieved this. Well, the stream will still be up, so feel free to go back and look through all the fun tidbits and such. Let's see what else we got. PowerPoint. Let's see. Anything else? Noah says use that $5 to buy yourself some TTS. Fine, I guess. Do you want TTS? Does Review want TTS? I don't know. That could be fun. We need to get Danny some TTS. Lucas says Colorama is my shepherd. Yeah, I really was against using it for a long time. I don't know why. I thought it was way more complicated than it actually was, but anyway. Lanaire says, what's the color palette guide layer? It's the color palette. But I have the guide layer. I have it set to a guide layer so that if I accidentally forget to turn it off before I render, I don't have to worry about accidentally baking in the color palette and having to re-render all over again. Nervous says, I just joined. I'll watch from start later. That's probably a good idea, but I'm glad you're hanging. Cloud says, I want to learn this stuff, but I don't know where to start. Well, what are you interested in? I would say watch as much as you can of that kind of work, and also just start creating, like, just give yourself the time to play around in the programs and mess around. The first time I used After Effects in my senior year of high school, I would spend a good portion of each class just with a solid layer in After Effects and just trying every single effect to see what it did. And eventually, I mean, every time that would spur some interest in, like, maybe I mix this thing and this thing. But I don't know. That's kind of how it worked for me. Watched a bunch of tutorials, you know. I always recommend TipTut has a great motion graphics for beginners series. That was, I think, the only tutorial series I watched all the way through on After Effects. That was awesome. Trim paths for the win. That man made me love trim paths. Instead, he says, real question, have you encountered this issue where the color in your Illustrator is faded out compared to After Effects? No, I think your Illustrator's just giving you shit, dude. I don't know why, but I can't say I've had that. Unless your Illustrator's in CMYK mode. That would probably explain that. Wen says, how would you name your animation style? I don't know, like 80s retro motion graphics, I guess. I don't know. There isn't really a name for it. Gradient motion graphics. I don't know. Some people say Revie style. Some say ordinary folk. It's got a bunch of different names, I guess, but 2D gradient motion graphics is probably the easiest thing to get the most results. But I think a lot of it comes from 80s influences with all the different, like, blurs and the blown out glows with noise and all that stuff. I feel like it's very reminiscent of that time. But then mixing it with, like, modern motion principles of, like, snappy easing and all that stuff. Oh yeah, it says, I'm joining for my grocery trip. What is on the grocery list, dude? I gotta know. What's up with that? Alive Dust Stuff says, me and my friends call the glow style Revie style. I'm here for that. I love to hear that. Thanks so much. Instead, he says it's in RGB. I don't know, man. That's really strange. I've only had that happen when it's in CMYK for me. My PC just crashed watching an After Effects stream. Huh. That's crazy. Clear your cache, man. Clear your cache. Also, that's just a reminder for everybody. Clear your After Effects cache. I think I was using After Effects for like over a year before I knew you could even do that, and I was always wondering why it was so slow. And then I knew. Now I'm constantly clearing 46 gigs out of my cache every 30 minutes or something, depending on what we're doing. Noah says, Wheelie Wall Motion Design. Is that the sub studio that we're gonna make? I'm cool with that. What do we think, chat? Wheelie Wall Motion Design? Next Revi franchise? Y'all are gonna be so excited for the stuff that we're making. Y'all are gonna have so much stuff to do, you know? It's gonna be a good time for motion design, dare I say. Wen says thank you. No problem. No problem. I may go through the loop after this tomorrow. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. That one was what song is that? Midnight City by M83, I believe, and then Blinding Lights after that. So that may happen tomorrow. It may not, but I'll post on socials and whatever if that is going to happen. Seti says, I figured it out. I checked color settings and changed it to emulate Adobe Illustrator 6.0. Interesting. I don't know that I've changed my color. I don't know that I've changed many settings in Illustrator other than the scaling strokes and corners and all that stuff. It always scares me to mess with preferences in Illustrator or After Effects because I feel like I'm just going to break something and not know what it was. But I'm glad you got your color situation sorted. Alive does stuff. When's the next collab with School of Motion? I believe that the thing we're making will probably be able to have some sort of collaboration with Joey and the School of Motion team. I think it'll make a lot of sense. But it's not a course, so I don't know about new course when. We don't really have any plans to make a course anytime soon. If we do make a course, I feel like there's a general feeling around the industry where people haven't been like super happy with the courses that have been out, especially from like a business side of things. So if we do make a course, I'd want to make sure that it just like really provides the value that people need and isn't just like, I don't want to be out here like promising that we can get people client work and all that sort of stuff, you know? But there's probably something we could do. Noah and I, well, Noah put a lot of work into a gradient course. It hasn't come out because we just don't know which direction we want to take it, but a lot of people know us for gradient stuff, so that could make sense. But that would be a ways away. We're doing some other stuff. I love the podcast you guys did back then. Kind of connected a lot with me. I loved that podcast. Joey's a great guy. He's very, to his words, very bullish on Revi, and I could tell he's a really sweet guy. So always happy to do stuff with them. He's a cool dude. But I don't know, maybe we'll do we'll do some more streams and things. I've been enjoying doing these again, as long as I actually have something to do on the stream. We did Daily Motion Show for like over 100 episodes or something, I think, where Noah and I would talk like motion business and stuff every day, but I don't know if we'll bring that back or not. We'll see. Olgerd is getting yogurt, ice cream, and lasagna. Are those all going together? I'm concerned. I don't know. What kind of night are you having? That sounds fun either way, but I found Star Wars art album and I had to buy it. Hey, I think that goes with that. I mean, it's the typical, it's the Four Horsemen: yogurt, ice cream, lasagna, and Star Wars album art. What more do you need? That's a good time right there, I think, anyway. But how's work been for all of y'all? I've asked this each stream, but we've had different people each time. Freelance wise, how's the industry going? We've been a little tapped out because we haven't worked with freelancers in new freelancers in like 2 years, probably. So I'm not as connected to what's going on with that. I know on the studio side it's been really strange. I'm sure on the freelance side it's been a little odd as well. Prices have been kind of all over the place, but anyway. Also, I need to know, oh good, what flavor of ice cream we're talking here. Oops, sorry, that probably got cut on stream. My squeaky microphone arm. But I don't know. We got a loop coming out Monday, I think. I don't remember if we got through all the feedback on it or not. But it'll be another Tame Impala one, actually. So kind of funny that I went through this one today. But it's a good one. There's some banger scenes in that one. Jackson went all out and had some really surprising things in there. Lots of like flying through space, slow-mo, cool, interesting surprise moments and stuff that I think people will like. But it's a good time. We've got another that's coming out next week. We'll have another sound effects challenge pretty soon. What else? Another spec ad. One of those retro pieces will be coming out in a couple weeks as well. I think y'all, I've been having to come up with stuff for me to do during the review day stuff. I'm caught up on all my client work, and then I have enough of like the internal stuff done for the next like 3 months. So like review is like planned out. We are prepared and ready to go. But anyway. Alive says, been scouting in all of Behance, Pinterest, Dribbble, and Vimeo for a new reward point motion design for my company. Would be storyboarding that this entire weekend. Oof. Yeah, I mean, there's what's that service people use for collecting inspiration? It's a like off-white website with like gray source code pro text or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but I know people find that service pretty helpful. I wish I could remember what it was called. But Noah and Sam go crazy on the inspo side of things. I haven't been on the inspo train in quite a while, but it has made it better because I was caught up on a lot of the stuff happening across the industry for a hot minute, but now going to Behance and seeing a bunch of new stuff every time I think is a lot more rewarding. But anyway, there it is. I don't want to keep it going too long so that people can watch this back and get all the info they need easily, should they need it. But thank y'all for hanging. It has been a good time. I hope y'all learned everything you needed to know about how I animated Borderline with, well, by Tame Impala as a loop. If you got any other questions, always feel free to reach out. Hit me up on socials, all that stuff. Links in the description. And otherwise,